But first, the pandemic has changed a lot in this country, no doubt about it. From the invention of the National Cabinet to our inability to cross state borders or even attend a sporting fixture, COVID has forced new rules and new ways of looking at old problems. But it's also provided government an opportunity, some may say an excuse, to break with ideological orthodoxies that need a rethink, if not a tweak. Now, to this end, the federal government would, I think, be well advised to seize the moment and announce a permanent boost to the base rate of JobSeeker. Now, you'll recall at the height of the pandemic, the government virtually doubled the JobSeeker rate to $1,116 a fortnight. In my view, that was too generous and proved a disincentive for many to return to work and earn their keep. However, since then, the so-called coronavirus supplement has gradually reduced and JobSeeker's fortnightly base rate now sits at a little over $700. Now, some will note that as the rate of JobSeeker has come down, so too has the number of unemployed. Well, perhaps that's more than just coincidence. However, after March 31, all supplements are due to expire, and without legislative intervention, JobSeeker will revert back to what it was pre-COVID. That is $565.70 a fortnight. Or put another way, about $40 a day. Now, I readily acknowledge this is the base rate. For some, there will be rental assistance and child support payments on offer as well. But when a coalition as diverse as John Howard and Barnaby Joyce, Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe, Chris Richardson from Deloitte Access Economics, unions, charity groups and some captains of industry all say this thing needs a boost, then I'm inclined to think the case for change is strong. Now, at the end of the day, what Australia needs is a strong economy with as close to full employment as possible. That's got to be the aim. Many of those who access JobKeeper are not pot-smoking surf addicts, but they're rather decent middle-aged men and women struggling to adjust to a rapidly changing work environment. They want to return to work. They just need a short-term helping hand to make ends meet. But if that helping hand is so punitive, it actually acts as a handbrake rather than an accelerator back into the workforce, then it isn't serving the national interest at all. I think this debate is no longer about should JobSeeker be increased, but rather by how much. Now, hitting that sweet spot needs to be the Morrison government's target before April the 1st. I think a figure of, say, $50 a day would be a good place to start. Well, Campbell, obviously you've been at the centre of government, albeit state government, for years. What's your take?
Look, you know what? When you put it forward in the way you have this evening, you've certainly quoted a few prominent individuals who you wouldn't normally expect to advocate for largesse when it comes to the social security system. Well, you've really got to sit up and take notice. So I'm really inclined to agree that it should be raised, and it really is a debate about how much should it go up by. I guess, and I don't want to take us too far from the actual topic, but for me it's really about the end of the day that we actually have the right sort of process to make sure people who are receiving any sort of government assistance are actually deserving, and that it doesn't have people sort of choosing to spend their days, for example, living in a share house and surfing. As long as we don't have that sort of situation, as long as people are encouraged to get out there and work, why not give them a bit more? Because it certainly isn't enough. We'd all agree with that, I think, to actually live on.
Yeah. Now, Ryan, look, I assume the position from the Kell Institute is to, in fact, raise the rate. But it's interesting, as Campbell noted, as I noted, a bunch of very loud and prominent conservative voices, and even some within business, not the ACCI, but many others in business, are saying, well, we couldn't live on $40 a day. Why should anybody else?
Well, I think that's right. $40 a day is living in poverty, and no one should be doing that. I think the other thing to remember is that $40 a day isn't enough income on which you can look for work. You know, putting CVs in, turning up to job interviews, doing all the things that we expect and ask and require job seekers to do. In return, we should be giving them a living allowance so that they can both pay the bills, put food on the table, but also turn up to job interviews and be able to look for work and get job ready. That's fundamentally what this system should be about, supporting people with enough income when they can't find a job and giving them enough support to get back into the labour market, because there's more people unemployed today than there were 12 months ago, and we've got to be giving them all the support we possibly can.
Yeah, Karina, I mean, there is this stereotype, isn't there? Whenever you talk about the unemployed, there's this sort of, the shots you see on A Current Affair, the people up at Nimbin Way and whatever, and people's like, well, look, they're not keen to work, why should we give them another brass rosoo? Well, I would agree with that for some people, but look, the reality, and we all know this, and I take calls about this on the open line all the time, the reality is the bulk of people on Newstart are getting older. As the workforce changes, they're struggling to adjust. As I said, they want to work, but you can't have an arrangement where it's punitive to the point where it actually acts as a roadblock to getting back into work rather than a helping hand.
Absolutely. There are a few rotten apples that sort of spoil it for the rest of people, but on JobSeeker, you're lucky if you can afford a haircut or a new pair of shoes to get yourself presentable for a job interview after you've paid for your groceries and your bills. It is not a wage that would allow you to be living at the poverty line. It's something that we need to certainly look at increasing. A Liberal government, one of our core values is that we provide a safety net for those who are experiencing disadvantage, and that's really important that there is a strong safety net in place. As I mentioned, people are not trying to generally rort the system. People are doing it tough out there at the moment. It's hard for people to find jobs to even apply for. It's hard for people who have acquired a disability. They have to wait 2 years from being diagnosed before they might even become eligible to apply for disability support pension. But also for those on JobSeeker, there are mutual obligations. You do have to apply for jobs. You do have to participate in things like the Work for the Dole program, volunteering and things like that. But I do think that when it comes to those mutual obligations, they should be more tailored, perhaps greater investment into people who are experiencing disadvantage, because putting in job application after job application and being turned back is demoralising. And so a more robust mutual obligations program, I think, would be a great investment as well.
I think as well, you've got to sort of look at the difficulty that it presents businesses in Australia when they go to employ people. And I was talking to actually a couple in the UK in the last few weeks, and I was quite struck that the UK, who I always assumed would have had a much sort of tighter sort of set of rules about employing people. No, it's not. According to the people I was talking to, who are Australian expats, it's easier to employ people in the UK, and if you can't continue to afford them in the business, to let them go. No one wants to let the good staff go. But that is really ultimately part of the debate we've got to have. So, again, I'm quite happy to see JobKeeper go up. But I tell you what, we really need to make it easier for people to employ people in this country. And I don't think too many politicians these days, and sadly even union officials, get that it is a very big decision. It is a very big decision to employ someone, and you really do have to think about the rules and regulations. Are you paying people correctly? Because some awards, for example, are incredibly complex. So hand in glove, these things are connected. We've got to see that sorted out as well.
Yeah, I mean, they don't just float around as islands unto themselves, do they, Campbell? But, I mean, it sounds like what you're advocating there is a return to work choices. Now, I'm not against it, but there again, I don't know if Scott Morrison's got the ticket to take something like that to an election. He doesn't seem to really be a guy to put a stake in the ground and say, well, this is what I stand for.
Well, I don't know what Ryan's going to say to this, but it is the practicality of it. I mean, the people who do the private sector employment, the businesses, will tell you that every time. Park the public sector, different kettle of fish, but the private sector employers will tell you that any day of the week. So surely we should listen to a fair extent to the people who have to make those tough decisions and take the responsibility of employing people, and cut them a bit of slack while protecting people from, capricious, sort of dismissal by, bad employers and poor treatment in the workplace. I think we're very fair. The system actually errs on the side of the employee in Australia.
Campbell, I don't think we're going to get anywhere by making it easier to sack people. And making it easier to sack people doesn't create jobs. Economic growth creates jobs. I think that the industrial relations system we have here in Australia has at its core the notion of fairness, or it should, and that in giving that fairness, it provides people with a living wage, and that's exactly what it should be doing. I think we will run ourselves into a lot of danger if we go down the path of going back to work choices, which, you know, is something that clearly could be on the table here in Australia as the industrial relations debate ramps up.
I wasn't talking about firing people particularly, Ryan. I was talking about actually the complexity of awards, the actual expense, the on-costs of employing people, and that's a big deal.
Paying people correctly is not a complicated thing.
Well, small businesses do find a big challenge in dealing with poor levers, employees who deliberately exploit the system, take them to various tribunals, cost them a lot of money, and indeed there's a lot of businesses, small businesses, who just essentially have to pay go-away money when someone who wants to actually work the system.
Are you saying it should be easier for people to sack people if they don't like them in their small business? Because that's what it sounds like, and that seems like a return to work choices for me.
Well, Ryan, you can throw your labels around, mate, as you did the last time I was on this show with you, and you can try and verbal me, but I'm telling you what businesses are actually saying, and I'm actually a businessman. Have you ever employed anybody? Have you taken responsibility for 1, 2, 5 or 10 individuals for you as the boss? Have you ever done that, Ryan? Well, I have, and I can tell you now, it's a big responsibility, and it's not done lightly. No, it's not. But so
it's
you
also
haven't employed anyone, Ryan?
I have.
Well, Ryan, come on, tell me, in what? In the public sector or the private sector?
No, in the private sector.
Have you done in the public sector with us? You've done in the private sector. Well, tell us about it. What was the experience like?
It was relatively simple. I looked up the award. I found what they should be paid. I paid them every week. We made sure that.
And did you ever have a problem with a bad lever? Did you ever have a problem with a bad lever? No? Well, I can tell you now, I speak to a lot of small businesses, and they tell me that if someone wants to take them to the cleaners, they will, and they end up finding it's easier to sort of pay $20,000 or $30,000 in go-away money for someone who simply had a bad attitude and was a bad employee. And we've got to protect small business from that. And the small business lobby groups will tell you that's going on as well. It's not me making it up, mate.